Yesterday, my friend and I had an interesting conversation. We were saying, do we prefer the rain or the shine? And I responded by saying I prefer the shine. My friend responded by saying she prefers the rain. And that got me thinking, because I think for the longest period of time, I too am a rain person, right? I enjoy the cool. In Singapore, it's exceedingly hot, and the thought of, well, the consideration that temperatures would go down can only happen either in an air-conditioned environment, or if you want the outdoors, it has to be in the rain. So these are the only two options. But at the end of last year, something surprising happened. I was on my way to school, everything was fine, and then it started to rain. And the moment it started to rain, I started to feel sad. Now, of course, we do have a term for that. I believe it's called seasonal affective disorder. But it doesn't change the fact that the experience is a very much real one. It was quite surprising. It got me thinking that, well, what's going on, right? What's with the sudden sadness about the rain? Do I not, prefer colder environments? Do I not prefer, well, in Singapore it's really hot, right? So why not have something that's cooler? Well, even the context of the cooler bit does sort of go back to an experience in life that I never noticed affected me that much, right? And that's, I guess, the title of this video, which is how eczema completely shaped my life. I wouldn't say it ruined my life as much as it shaped my life. And perhaps some of you who have or had severe eczema, I think you might be able to empathize. You might be able to relate to this experience. I've had a severe eczema for the longest amount of time. It got so bad at one point in time that I couldn't leave the house at all. Any movement, any bending of my limbs will lead to an excruciating pain. It's a burning sensation. It's really quite, well, it was painful, it was hurtful, I felt I was suffering. I felt like there was no end to my suffering either. And the impact of that is, of course, well, if you have bits of sweat, right? You have bits of sweat here and there. Oh, by the way, this is a weekend with lovely picnics happening all over the island. With a little bit of sweat, you can't afford to sweat, right? With a little bit of sweat, the skin gets itchy, right? There's some kinds of irritations happening in the skin. It gets itchy, you scratch. Once you scratch, the wounds worsen, you scratch even more, and it just does not end. The only real relief that we could possibly have comes from, I guess, steroid creams. And of course, there's quite a bit of effort in trying to offer steroidless options to heal the skin. But more or less, most solutions involve some form of a steroid cream. Now, all of that has affected the way I've lived my life, right? Because being in the outdoors was effectively inaccessible to me. I couldn't live in the outdoors. The moment I'm outdoors, in Singapore at least, I start to sweat. And once I start to sweat, my skin disease starts to worsen. And the moment my skin disease starts to worsen, well, just living feels more like dying, right? And I think if you've had eczema before, I believe you can relate to that as well. Now, how does that affect my life? Well, if I can't be in the outdoors, I have to carry out my life indoors. And if I can't carry out my life physically, at least physically I was basically handicapped, right? Then I had to look inward. And I guess that is, strangely enough, paradoxically, that also became sort of the external factor that led me to max stats, the more cognitive side of life. Mathematics, theology, reflections. People call me a really reflective person. I guess that's true. And I've always found it interesting trying to use words to describe difficult to label experiences, right? I believe we all experience things, and the hard part is actually trying to put a word to it. I like to say it this way: if you can put a word to a common experience, you should get a PhD. I guess it's not a PhD, but you get the point, right? I mean, that's effectively the role of higher university education, boils down to using words to describe common enough experiences that are sufficiently common among sufficiently many people. And I do think that is the art of articulation, and I have been on a quest to articulate a lot of things. In math, we have to articulate a lot of things, and we have to define a lot of things, and I guess that has influenced the way I'm doing things, even the way I'm vlogging and thinking about things, the way my brain works, the way I self-reflect quite a bit. It's a nice sunny weekend, so I'm thankful, by the way, for the sun. I tried filming yesterday, but it was raining and it did not go well. Now, what does that... I guess that's linked, right? So because of the fact that I have had severe eczema, I was basically handicapped to indoor activities. And I could only more or less survive in the rain. But now, my skin is actually a lot better. You know what? Praise the Lord, right? It's way better. I can actually go about my life much more freely. I can walk around more freely. I can actually walk around with a little bit of sweat and it doesn't really itch up, so that's amazing, right? Yes, it's unpleasant, but you know, I'm not dying, right? I'm not like stuck on a bed. I'm not scratching all over the place. I'm not worsening my skin wounds. It helps a lot to be able to have a body that's resistant to sweat in that sense. But it also became apparent that that is what I've been missing out for the longest amount of time, the physical world. Because of the fact that I did not have much access to the physical world, I basically retreated into the internal world. I retreated into a more reflective, meditative, contemplative, intellectual side of things. My hobbies involve basically some permutation of thinking, right? So thinking about math, thinking about God, thinking about whatever, but it's thinking, it's all in here, rather than outwardly. I think there's something interesting to note as well when it comes to various Christian denominations. I do think that part of it has to do with the fact that some denominations are more inclined towards the intellect, towards thinking, and others are inclined towards more of sensory experience. And the thing is, God created both the physical world and in the internal world, right? So I find myself lacking the balance when it comes to the external world. I find myself rather handicapped in this area, and I think my skin disease had a lot to do with that. I don't know if you feel that way as well. Some of you, if you have eczema and you still play sports, you know how uncomfortable it is afterwards. Now, of course, perhaps your love for your sport would outweigh the discomfort of your eczema, and therefore you have learned how to get around with it, right? You bring a towel everywhere you go, you bring your moisturizers or your creams and whatnot. You try to find as much cooling devices. But let's put it this way, you and I would need that as opposed to others who do not need that. And that itself is a fundamental difference in the way that we might relate to each other, let's say. Right? And so, I don't know if you're still experiencing the skin disease, you're healed up from it. I'm not saying it's easy. I think I can say that it was quite a difficult experience. And if my peers when I was younger, when I was a student, I think you guys could tell that was like the biggest handicap, one of the biggest handicaps of my life. I remember when I was suffering 10 years back, well, 11 years back, that was 2015. I was lying on my bed, I was bedridden, I couldn't move, and I was lamenting to the Lord. I was asking God, like, what's the point of how am I supposed to worship and glorify you while I'm stuck on my bed? Like, how am I supposed to do anything? Right? And, well, the Lord kindly gave me a thought. Other people have physical fitness, but look at what this pain and suffering is doing for your faith. And I guess now the way I would define that word is to look at how this pain and suffering has pushed you to place your confidence in nothing else but God's consistency in carrying out His promises, let's say. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm not saying that we should have eczema. I'm not saying we should have sickness or suffering or disease. I'm not saying that any of these should persist into heaven. We thank God it's not gonna persist in heaven. But I cannot deny the effect that this skin disease has on my life. And as much as I don't want to say that it's part of me, or at least, in the previous video, the question is, who am I? I believe this eczema really did contribute a huge proportion to who I am today. And I believe that if you are dealing with it, it would certainly contribute at that level to you as well. It is by no means wasted. I guess, well, it's somewhat cliche. It is still true, right? The enemy means it for evil, but God means it for good. And so your skin disease is not wasted.